the air, we're waiting for what would be potentially the biggest diplomatic breakthrough in this war between Israel and Hamas. A deal to release dozens of women and children held in Gaza, tentatively now on the table, and an announcement, a more formal announcement, could come literally any minute. Maybe while we're live on the air here. We're live in the region with the details that we're learning. We'll have that in just a minute. Plus, a big test for Thanksgiving travel. We'll talk in a lot of wind, wet roads, even snow and ice in some spots. As millions of people head home for the holiday, we'll explain what you need to watch out for in just a sec. Plus, a step toward justice, potentially, in a string of mysterious attacks and robberies targeting the gay community in New York City. Why some victims say there's still a long way to go in our original tonight. Then a new clue into what may be making potentially thousands of dogs sick. How a quote-unquote funky bacteria, literally, that's the experts' words, could be behind this whole thing. Plus, the housing market not looking too hot right now, with inventory about half of what it should be. When and how things could get better for folks who have been struggling to buy property for years, later in the show. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and we may be on the verge of a significant breakthrough in the Israel-Hamas war. Maybe. With a tentative deal on the table to release at least some of the people being held hostage in Gaza. This is according to a senior U.S. official and a source familiar with the talks in the region. And the whole thing's contingent on Israel approving it. That approval could come really any minute, meaning we may see live the biggest diplomatic breakthrough in this war so far tonight. So what would this look like? What would the contours of any deal be? Around 50 women and children held captive by Hamas for more than 6 weeks now could be freed in exchange for about 150 Palestinian prisoners being held in Israel. The deal It could also include an agreement to pause fighting for a specific number of days, according to a top Hamas leader. And Israel late today says it's also possible that any ceasefire could last even longer for the release of 10 more hostages a day, with lots of questions around that right now. And listen, lots of questions generally around all of this, right? The numbers, the contours of this, because while we may be seconds away from this breakthrough, it's just not a done deal yet. It's not. And President Biden is making that very clear. Watch.
Very close, very close. We could bring some of these hostages home very soon. Nothing is done until it's done. And we have more to say, we will, but things are looking good at the moment.
You heard the president there saying things are looking good at the moment. Now, timing-wise, if a deal does come together tonight, don't expect to see any hostages walking free this evening. That's because there's a 24-hour appeals period that would be built into a potential prisoner exchange. More on that in a minute. So as this all hangs over the war, the Israeli military says it hit 250 more targets inside Gaza in just the last day. Hamas buildings, they say missile launchers, militants themselves. We should note NBC News has not verified these claims as Israel retaliates for that terror attack now about 6 weeks ago. I want to bring in our team who's live for us in the region, Aaron McLaughlin and Keir Simmons, both in Tel Aviv. Keir, I want to start with you because you have been covering this issue of hostages for weeks now. The prime minister has been in meetings basically all day into the evening over this deal. It's midnight where you are. Explain what the expectation is, what the hope is for the next couple of hours here, and the frankly huge international push it took to even get to this moment.
Well, the Israeli government's been locked in meetings, various meetings now for 6 hours, Hallie. It is an extraordinary moment right now. I mean, it's midnight here in Israel. The Israel-Hamas war continues in Gaza. Around the world, the U.S. administration, the Qataris who've been mediating this, are now out in public openly saying we want a deal. The Qataris saying just in the past few hours that they put a deal on the table at dawn here in Israel, and yet we don't know right now whether a deal is going to be done. We think it is. We think there's going to be a vote behind closed doors of the Israeli government that will say, yeah, OK, we agree to this. And you outlined some of the details of what it would look like. 50 hostages released, around 150 Palestinian women and children released in exchange, all those kinds of things that we've been talking about over the past few days. And then maybe more if there is a trust built and if it seems to work. But right now, the question tonight is whether it's going to work at all, because we don't know what is being said in that Israeli government meeting. Again, extraordinary. Just to make the point, in the past few weeks, I've been told again and again by officials that they didn't want to get ahead of their skis, they didn't want to be too public because they didn't want to scupper things. Well, now everything's out in the open, and yet we don't know for sure this is happening.
So it is possible then we could hear more tonight, Keir. Do we know anything else about the pause in fighting here? Because this has been, as you well know, it seems critical to these discussions over the course of the last several weeks here. What is this pause or ceasefire or whatever you want to call it? What does that actually look like? How long does it last?
Well, we saw a pre-recorded statement from the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, just played out in the past few hours, and that appears to be recorded before, or at least before some of the Israeli government meetings. And in that, interestingly, he says that President Biden intervened in the past few days to improve the deal for the Israelis, it seemed to intimate. But he also insisted that the war, in the way that he put it, the war would continue, that it wouldn't be the end of that war after this pause that might last 5 days, might continue for further days. And I think that was a message to the right. Remember, there are people to the right, politicians to the right of him in his government, in that cabinet. I think it was a message to them to, if you like, kind of placate those who are openly saying they don't agree with doing a deal. But again, the question is whether that kind of argument is holding sway inside this Israeli government meeting taking place right now, and we don't know whether a vote has been held. I should say, what we think will happen if they do vote, and if they vote in favor, is that the Qataris will then make an announcement, and then, as you mentioned, this pause and hostage release will begin to take place over the coming days. But I mean, all of that is on pause right now while we wait for news from the Israelis.
Keir, I know that you are standing by in an extremely flexible posture, given what could come down. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. I want to bring in Aaron McLaughlin now, because, Aaron, part of the reason that the discussion of this ceasefire is so critical because of the new details we're getting on the cost of this war on civilians, on the innocent people caught up in this here. You've got the WHO trying to evacuate hospitals, and I want to play for people some of this video that we've seen. People trying to get water off of trucks that are bringing in help, right? We can show it here. I mean, they're basically, I mean, you can see the desperation, people rushing these trucks to try to get their hands on whatever they can. Talk to us about the humanitarian situation as it stands tonight.
Well, Hallie, the humanitarian situation is desperate, and the violence today continued in northern Gaza. There was a strike, according to Doctors Without Borders, in a hospital near the Jabalia refugee camp, and 2 of the Doctors Without Borders staff were killed in that strike. Doctors Without Borders, or MSF, putting out a statement about that attack today, saying MSF has regularly shared information about Al-Awda as a functioning hospital and the presence of our staff there to the warring parties. We condemn this strike in the strongest terms and call yet again for the respect and protection of medical facilities, staff, and patients. Now, this is one of the hospitals that I was actually just speaking with a WHO official about yesterday. He said that there were 2 hospitals out of 24 still functioning in northern Gaza. This one and another NGO hospital. Every single hospital in northern Gaza that is backed by the Gazan Health Ministry, which is Hamas-controlled, has been essentially put out of commission. The WHO right now is working to evacuate at least 3 hospitals, including the main hospital, which this WHO official described as the backbone of the Gazan healthcare system, the Al-Shifa hospital. And the concern among the WHO is, if this war persists, if there is no pause in this fighting, that as the Israeli military starts to look south, what could happen to the situation in the south, which is already desperate, given the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians that have fled there. Hallie.
Aaron, there's also a piece of this that we've been talking about a lot here on this show, which is the premature babies that were evacuated from Gaza into Egypt. Babies presumably younger than this war itself. They had been trapped in a hospital. Some of them got out. There's at least, I believe, 1 or 2 who are still in the hospital in Gaza because they're too fragile to evacuate. I know you've been reporting on this. What can you tell us tonight?
Yeah, these were babies that were trapped in that hospital I was just talking about, the backbone of the Gazan healthcare system, the Al-Shifa hospital that had been besieged for around 2 weeks. They managed, with the help of the WHO, to facilitate the evacuation, an evacuation which continues today. But the first tranche, if you will, of patients were those prematurely born babies that had to be removed from their incubators because of a lack of electricity inside of that hospital. They were brought, the majority of them, to Egypt, but 3 of the babies remain in Gaza. We met with one of the families. Anas is the baby's name. His family thought he was dead. They saw that the fighting around Al-Shifa, they were forced to flee to the south. They thought he was dead, and then suddenly saw that the babies had been evacuated. They called the hospital in the south asking if he was alive, and they said he was alive. And we saw today, he came home to his family today, and they were smiling and crying tears of joy. And in fact, in the 2 weeks that I've been here reporting on the story, it's the first smile that I've seen in Gaza. It was really a heartwarming scene, but it also sort of illustrates the point that behind every one of those babies, which captured the world's heart, there is a story, and there's a family hoping and waiting. And we're told by the officials that many of those babies still have yet to be reunited with their families. Hallie.
Erin McLaughlin, it's incredible reporting. Thank you for bringing it to us here tonight. I appreciate it. I want to bring in Abby Owen now, whose family members were taken hostage by Hamas, 3 of them supposedly being held captive as we speak. The others have been found dead weeks after that attack by Hamas. Abby, thank you for being with us, and thank you for your time tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Let me start with this. Have you heard anything from the Israeli government, from any liaison for the government at this point yet tonight?
No, we are as current as you.
Tell me about this tentative deal, the contours of which have now been widely reported. Are you getting a sense of hope, of optimism for your family here?
Yes. I mean, I think it's really hard when you discuss any deal that sorts humans by gender or age. But at the same time, I believe that we can all agree that war should not be built on the backs of babies and children. And so if there is a diplomatic effort for their release, I think it's a step in the right direction.
Would you like to see this deal go further? Do you think this does what it needs to do at this point?
I mean, I would love to see all 200 and, close to 40 of them come home, because this deal doesn't include the father of the 2 children in my family who would be released. It doesn't include Hirsch Goldberg Poland, who is wounded. It doesn't include, a lot of people. But I believe that it is movement, and movement is positive. We've seen 4 people released and 1 person rescued in 46 days. And that's not enough. This needs to end much faster. And so I think if we can get movement of 50 people, and there's talk of potentially releasing the 30 Thai nationals, that any of that would be positive.
I understand that a member of your family tried to get into a meeting. It was, the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has been meeting in some instances with families of hostages. There's somebody in your family who tried to get into that meeting last night. She says she was not allowed in. Can you tell us anything more about that?
I got a message from someone saying, I'm confused. It looks like there's a ton of people outside of the meeting, and the meeting's happening. And so it seems like, look, there's more than 200 families. There's a lot of people that want to be in the room, and it's probably not simple to organize. I know that, we have been meeting with the government over and over, whether it be members of Knesset or the War Cabinet. The member of my family, one of them that was killed, was an American citizen, and we met often with the U.S. government. We've met with the French government. At this point, the meetings that are taking place right now, that's what we need to happen. And we just need to keep the pressure on. We're outside government buildings in Tel Aviv all day protesting, making sure that they know that this must be the first priority, that the children and all of the hostages need to be brought home now.
What would your message be, Abby, for the Israeli government right now?
To move and to act. The time is running out. We saw tonight that Islamic Jihad announced the death of one of the hostages, a woman who needed medical care and didn't get it and lost her life as a captive. And that can't happen. 2 of my family members were taken hostage and they were killed as captives. We need our hostages home alive. And we have a deal that will allow a number of them to come home now. We won't stop fighting. Even if these 50 get out, we will continue fighting for every single hostage, but we need them to move on the behalf of Israeli citizens. It is their job to protect them.
And before I let you go, Abby, I know that the relatives that you have being held hostage are just 12 and 16 years old. They're just kids.
Yes.
What message would you have for them if they could hear from you tonight? What do you want to tell them?
Their mother is waiting for them, that she wants nothing more than to see them and hug them and take care of them. And I think that's the only message.
Abby Owen, thank you. I know this has been an unimaginable nightmare for you and for your family and for so many others. We appreciate your time, and we'll be watching every development along with you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Also overseas tonight, you've got the U.S. military in the region today retaliating against Iraqi militants after they say that U.S. and coalition troops were attacked. We've been telling you about some of these attacks. There have now been at least 65 attacks against bases with Americans in Iraq and Syria. At least 62 people have been hurt just since October 17th. So really just since this Israel-Hamas war started. I want to bring in our Courtney Kube, who's live for us at the Pentagon. So a couple of things here, right? Let's start with this attack itself, this specific one, because we've been talking about the dozens that have occurred in just the last maybe month or so, not even. This is the first time that a short-range ballistic missile has been used in one of these attacks against U.S. troops and coalition forces. Why is that significant?
Because it's a real escalation, Hallie, from what we have seen in these 65-plus other attacks since October 17th. Most of those have involved drones, rockets, some mortars. Dangerous, don't get me wrong, but we're talking here about a ballistic missile, and because it was a shorter range or a closer range ballistic missile, it's difficult. It flies very fast, and it's difficult to stop. In fact, in this case yesterday, when the missile hit, it did strike the base. It hit an empty building. No one was inside, fortunately, according to defense officials, but still, it is an escalation over the previous ways that these militia groups have fired. Now, what's also different here is this isn't the first time that there's been an attack like this on a base in Iraq. Frankly, not even the first time that al-Assad has been targeted. But in this case, there was a U.S. military AC-130 gunship, that's a plane, that was overhead that actually spotted when the missile was fired off, was able to track and target the militants who fired it, and they attacked these militants, killing several of them in their vehicle. That's different as well. This is the first time that we've seen the U.S. take a retaliatory strike since these bases attacks have begun on October 17th in Iraq. So several things very different here, and it's the first time that we know of that multiple militants were killed, Hallie.
The other piece of this, right, the other thing that makes this different from what else has happened before is obviously the retaliation here. I know the Pentagon has said that this happened, and I don't want to butcher the phrasing here, but it was something like almost immediately. Like this was extremely quick. The strike happened, the retaliatory strike happened almost immediately after the initial attack. That piece of it is important too, right?
Exactly, because that's very different in the previous cases where the U.S. has taken strikes, again, all in Syria, none have been in Iraq yet. It has been a day, maybe two, after an attack that yielded U.S. military injuries or damage to infrastructure that the U.S. has responded in Syria. And again, it's not just that. They've been targeting infrastructure in these attacks in Syria, buildings with ammunition, buildings that housed, a training facility. In this case, it was an almost immediate response with an aircraft that was already overhead that targeted a vehicle carrying militants. It was virtually certain that militants would be killed in this instance, Hallie.
Courtney Kube, live for the Pentagon, covering a lot of moving pieces. Court, thank you. Let's get you now back here at home to this Thanksgiving test for travelers today. Some pretty gross weather plays spoiler in people's plans. You see it playing out here live. This is Atlanta's airport. You see it flashing there. Wet runways. You've got the skyline pretty much gone in all the fog there. On the right here, highways in Philly right now jam-packed with cars. Oof, all those headlights. Looks like maybe some slick roads. At least what we can tell in the dark. It's all from this storm right here, dropping rain and snow, leaving some ice in some spots. And the concern? This storm is moving right across the I-95 corridor, which goes through some of the country's biggest cities on one of the country's biggest travel days of the year. Look at some of these airport hubs. You see 95, right? 95 is right in the mix right there. We just showed you, too, some of the airport hubs that are affected as well. I have to tell you, though, not to jinx it, but so far, at least at airports, so far, so decent. 3,000 delays, but only about 40 cancellations. That's not terrible, folks. We've got meteorologist Bill Karen standing by with the forecast, but I want to get to Stephen Romo on all things travel. It seems like if the airports aren't so terrible, great. Question is the roads with this snow, with this ice, with this wind, making conditions really yucky, especially at night on one of the busiest travel days of the year.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Hallie. Of course, more people do drive, but I think more of the complaints come from those airports and that holiday travel. Thankfully, as you mentioned, a lot of people preparing for the worst, but it has not manifested just yet. Things, though, they still are early. There have been some problems, though. The cloud cover did cause some temporary ground stop in Charlotte, North Carolina. That lifted, but then a ground delay was then instated there in Charlotte, North Carolina. So flights headed there were held at their departure cities for up to 90 minutes. So, of course, some more complaints coming in from that. Air travel, though, could get tougher tonight. Rain causing the FAA to consider those ground stops at JFK here in New York and at Reagan Airport in D.C. Many flyers, though, are saying that they have been burned so many times in the past that they are planning ahead. Here's more of what they had to say.
I was a little bit nervous that it would be some delays, but so far so good.
Delayed flights, 7 o'clock. I was supposed to, it's supposed to be 7:40 now. It's not too bad.
I feel very lucky that we're leaving on Tuesday, and so far it seems really easy and simple.
Now, the storm also has a wintry side, so Syracuse, New York, and also in Bedford, Massachusetts, workers had to head out to de-ice some of those planes. So there is some concern there, but nothing too punishing so far on that front, Hallie.
Knock on wood, Steve. Don't jinx it. Don't jinx it. Thank you very much, Stephen Romo. Appreciate it. I want to bring in Bill Cairns now. So, Bill, this was the day that you were the most worried about of this entire Thanksgiving holiday travel week. And I can see it, right? The thick of that storm heading right into the 95 corridor. If people are trying to get a jump start, get to wherever they're going for Thanksgiving tomorrow.
Yeah, and hats off to everyone at the airports and the airlines because there have been very few cancellations, even with the rainy day on the East Coast. So, yeah, that's great. But the roads are a different story. It's, you got everyone going home from school, from work, plus travel. It's a nightmare on the roads in many areas from the Ohio Valley all through the I-95 corridor. So the tail end of our storm, we were worried about isolated severe storms. We haven't had any, but there are some thunderstorms rolling through Georgia and just exiting Alabama. Atlanta, it looks like you're now in the clear. The worst of it is definitely up here to the north. All of Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, just locked in the heavy rain. We do have some snow that's broken out in the Catskills, the Hudson Valley, a brief shot of snow around the Albany area. That'll go over to rain pretty quickly. But north of Albany, northern New England, Adirondacks, White and Green Mountains, those are the areas that are going to get accumulating snows this evening. So very careful. Give yourself a lot of extra time driving there. But look at this. Even with all the rain on the map, green across the board. You know, it's rare to have all the New York City airports with no delays on a sunny, beautiful day, let alone with the rain moving in. So we'll take it as long as we have it. Here's how it looks through the day tomorrow. Let's pause this at about 5 p.m. Notice the East Coast, you clear out. Rainy morning, beautiful afternoon. So anyone traveling tomorrow, if you could hold off till the rain stops, it looks like the road should be a lot better. And here's those rainfall snow totals, actually. You notice the Green Mountains, the Adirondacks here, anywhere in blue is about 2 to 4 inches. And the mountains of Maine are going to get it. Any of my friends that love to ski there at Sunday River, you're going to have a little Thanksgiving surprise, maybe even up to a foot. So, Hallie, Wednesday, we're looking great after the rain exits. And how about this for Thanksgiving Day? Unless you're in Wyoming, I'm sorry, Wyoming people, you're going to have to deal with snow. The rest of the country looks perfect for anyone driving locally.
Nice to know. Bill Cairns, thank you. We'll check back in with you, I know, as the evening develops and as the system develops, too. Appreciate it. Let's take you out west now because breaking in literally just the last 3 or 4 minutes or so, we are finding out that police have caught the man they think shot and killed 3 people this week in what had been a huge manhunt. Police say the shooting had been over a suspected property dispute. I want to show you here the suspect they've been looking for that, again, we've learned in just the last couple of minutes has now been arrested. He was apparently driving a white pickup truck. This all happened Monday afternoon in the neighborhood you see here. A SWAT team showed up and told people around here to shelter in place for something like 7 hours. Steve Patterson joins us now. So it's been about 24 hours that police have been on this manhunt. It sounds like it has now concluded, Steve. What do we know?
Concluding as of maybe the last 20, maybe 30 minutes or so. This is all coming in fast. The suspect, 45-year-old Hanmi Clark, believed to be in the area of Custer County. That's where this mass shooting took place. 5 people shot at, 4 shot, 3 killed, 1 critically injured as of now. And the suspect located and arrested in New Mexico, according to Custer County sheriffs, arrested by New Mexican authorities. This happened just before about 3 o'clock local local time that, again, would have been about 24 or so minutes ago. We don't know the details of that arrest, but there is an ongoing news conference as of about 3 minutes ago. I can't watch it. The desk is trying to feed me updates as we're talking, but obviously a very big deal for authorities that considered this guy armed and dangerous since that shooting. This took place, again, as you mentioned, about 24 hours ago, completely locking down this neighborhood in rural southern Colorado, a little bit outside of Colorado Springs or so. It was over, according to authorities, a property dispute about an easement that neighbors had. This dispute had been ongoing, according to police, for maybe since 2020. They would get repeated calls to these back and forth houses. This easement was like a dirt road. An easement, by the way, allows certain neighbors and property owners in the area to sort of cross over this person's property. Well, the property owner apparently was the shooter. There had been some disagreements in the past. The sheriff said basically he never thought it would come to this, come to a shooting. And then 3 people are dead. Police had a manhunt going for the last, obviously, 24 hours, including the counties that were very nearby. They said they were close to closing in on him. In fact, at the last news conference, maybe a few hours ago, maybe 4 or so hours ago, the U.S. Marshals were activated during the news conference. So they got this hot tip as we're watching the sheriff sort of talk about the situation, and then come to find out hours later that he's been arrested. Of course, This is all breaking. This is all ongoing. We'll have much more, of course, for the next update. But for now, this suspect, Hallie Clark, 45 years old, in custody in New Mexico for allegedly killing 3 people. Hallie?
Ton of developments late tonight. Steve, thank you. I'm going to let you go watch that news conference, talk to the folks you need to talk to. We'll check back in with you, I know, later on tonight. Appreciate it. So listen, late today, the CEO of the world's biggest crypto exchange is admitting to breaking rules against money laundering, which the Justice Department says made it easier for criminals and terrorists around the world to move money around on the platform. We're talking about Binance. You see it there. It is huge in the crypto world, as the DOJ is just announcing a plea agreement involving a $4 billion settlement to help close an investigation that's been going on for years. Here's the Attorney General late today.
Binance prioritized its profits over the safety of the American people. Now, Binance is paying one of the largest corporate penalties in U.S. history.
So the allegations against Binance are pretty similar to another big crypto exchange you've probably heard of, FTX. Remember them? Binance was one of the big FTX rivals before that exchange collapsed. So now you've got the DOJ with what experts see as wins against 2 huge crypto exchanges operating kind of at their peaks. I want to bring in Kate Rooney now. So, Kate, $4 billion to let this company keep running, but its very powerful CEO is going to step down. How big of a deal is this?
Hallie, so this is massive. You heard Merrick Garland just say that it is the largest penalty in history, the history of the Treasury Department. So the dollar amount is huge. It's a huge, influential company in the crypto space, the biggest company globally. And the CEO is also known as CZ, Changpeng Zhao, is agreeing to plead guilty in this federal case for federal charges. He's paying this $50 million fine as part of the larger $4 billion number. And that penalty, he's going to step down as CEO. This is the company he created, he ran, he was the figurehead, and he's been a really outspoken CEO on X, or formerly Twitter. He tried to draw a few different distinctions and differences between what happened at his company and what happened over at FTX. He said that the U.S. agencies in question here, they don't allege that Binance misappropriated any user funds or that Binance engaged in any market manipulation, which was the big story when it came to FTX. Sam Bankman-Fried misused and stole customer funds. Binance did not. That is a key distinction. And in that sense, he's still kind of seen as a hero in this industry. He's being referred to really as a martyr here by some of the investors who still very much respect him and say that he made mistakes. But the DOJ seeing this very much as a win today.
What are you hearing, and how do you see this, and how should we be thinking about this from the DOJ perspective? Because you had first FTX, right now Binance, as these federal officials, kind of come to terms or try to maybe get a handle on this fairly new world, like in the realm of things.
So it's hard to understand how influential and how big these 2 companies were globally. These were some of the big figureheads. Sam Bankman-Fried and CZ were the best known CEOs and executives and entrepreneurs in the space. So in that sense, a huge hit to the industry. This was expected. The investigation had gone on for years, and it really speaks to some of the the dark underbelly of crypto. Some of the things that the DOJ talked about and accused Binance of facilitating are really awful. Transactions that aided child sexual abuse, terrorist financing, sanctions violations. So in that sense, these are just really an awful reality of this industry. Those who are left in the industry, the legitimate players who are regulated in the U.S. say it's a good thing, they're going to move on. These were very much traditional financial crimes. The industry is going to try to turn the page here to a new chapter and hopefully a more legitimate chapter. But they're saying that this is part of the shakeout. They're moving on, and these have happened in the previous years of crypto. They see it as, you know, a chance to move on and try to build a really more legitimate chapter of finance and kind of go into the Wall Street mainstream here.
Kate Rooney, it's fascinating stuff. Thank you for that crystal clear breakdown. I appreciate it, as always. It's good to see you. Coming up here on the show, at least one person is dead, dozens missing in Alaska after a huge landslide. Why officials there say they can't even start the search and rescue yet. Plus, after decades of speculation, do we finally know Banksy's real name? The letter M is disappearing on the campus of Ohio State. We'll explain in just a minute. But first, to tonight's original with in-depth reporting on a topic we've been watching. And tonight, we're learning more about the man sentenced this week to 9 years in prison for the robbery of a New York City gay bar patron. Prosecutors say it's just the first sentencing in a much bigger investigation, looking at a whole bunch of similar incidents that turned deadly, killing 2 people and putting the LGBTQ plus community on edge. But for the many other victims, questions still linger. Here's Noah Pransky.
The attacks seemed targeted. Men at several New York City gay bars drugged, robbed, and thousands drained from their bank accounts. 2 of the victims died.
It's scary, actually, because it could happen to anyone.
Authorities say facial recognition was used to unlock some of their phones. Fear began to run rampant inside New York City's LGBTQ plus community. NBC News reporting shed light on the string of attacks starting last year.
I've been reporting on this scheme for about a year or more now, and I've spoken with victims and victims' family members for hours upon hours.
He was very lovable and smart.
Now, finally, some answers after NBC News Out reporter Matt Levitas went to Rikers Island Jail to speak with a man who pled guilty to one robbery that prosecutors say was connected to a larger crime ring.
Hello. What's going on, Matthew?
That man, Eddie Ashley, said he was just looking for a hookup when he went to a bar called The Ritz in New York's Hell's Kitchen. He later went home with someone and pled guilty to stealing their phone and wallet. He was sentenced this week to 9 years in prison, the most significant development yet in the wider investigation.
I lost a lot being here for something that was just one night. Like I said before, I was kind of intoxicated that night, so I don't remember too much stuff that happened that night.
Prosecutors say the broader ring left 16 men victimized.
It was clearly rooted in greed, total disregard for the victims.
Ashley denies knowledge of the crime ring and was not charged with murder, but 3 other men were. All told, 5 other men now charged, all pleading not guilty, now all awaiting trial. At first, for authorities, the crimes largely blended into the busy background of New York City nightlife. But for families of the 2 men killed, originally told by police their loved ones died from accidental drug overdoses, the stories just didn't add up, telling us last year,
there is definitely a system of being drugged, whether it's through drinking something or needles or whatever, that renders the person immobile to protest from being taken advantage of, and it wipes out your memory.
It took pressure from families, reporting from outlets like NBC News, and demonstrations to bring the attacks into full public view. But some victims still don't know if their attacks are connected to this specific alleged crime ring or other criminals using the same tactics. Back at Rikers, Eddie Ashley still downplaying his alleged role in the crimes, suggesting he only pled guilty to avoid trial.
I just really wanted you to get past everything.
For NBC's Matt Levitas, closure also tough to find.
This entire story has been about chronicling the pain of the city's LGBTQ community. And here before me was another young gay man, also in pain for different reasons, of course, but I was truly saddened.
Noah is joining us now. So Noah, talk us through the sort of police status here. Do they think these were still crimes specifically targeting the LGBTQ plus community?
No, actually, at this point, prosecutors now believe that while many of the men who were targeted were gay men at gay bars,
that was not really the motive. Profit and financial was deemed at this point to be the prime motive. Little consolation, of course, to many in the community here in New York who were so troubled that their community was under attack. Hallie?
Noah Pransky, thank you so much for that reporting, to Matt Levides and others as well. Appreciate it. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, the shooter has killed himself and hurt 4 others at a Walmart in Ohio. Officials say they have not ruled out that it could have been racially motivated. Walmart says it's working with investigators now at this point, as the shooting comes a day after 2 people were shot and killed outside a different Walmart in Alaska. Number 2, North Korea claims it successfully put a spy satellite into orbit, something officials in South Korea and Japan could not immediately confirm. Japan put out an emergency alert for part of the country. The UN bans North Korea from launching satellites, saying it's the country's way of covering up missile tests. The U.S. is condemning the launch. Number 3, remember Oscar Pistorius? He's going to get another chance at parole on Friday after a court earlier this year wrongly said he wasn't eligible for early release. He's the former, remembered, Olympic double amputee runner who went to prison back in 2014 for the shooting death of his girlfriend. Number 4, Bradley Cooper now defending that prosthetic nose he wears while playing composer Leonard Bernstein in the upcoming film Maestro. You remember when the trailer came out, people criticized it as anti-Semitic, but Cooper says it just didn't look right without the prosthetic nose. Number 5, we've seen a whole lot of street art by Banksy, but might we actually finally know at least part of his real name? This interview with the BBC from back in 2003 has just resurfaced. In it, he says his first name, Robbie. Another clue to the identity of Banksy. When we come back, we're going to take you back to the Middle East because you're going to meet an Israeli and a Palestinian united by loss, now working together to bring peace. So even as officials close in potentially on a hostage deal between Israel and Hamas, as we've talked about here in this show, there is still fighting in Gaza. And sometimes it can be hard to see an end to it all. Communities divided, increasingly entrenched online. But there is a group of Israelis and Palestinians made up of the people most affected by the decades-old war, the decades-old conflict, who come together to support each other. Jay Gray has the story.
Outrage and emotions online and spilling into the streets. Across the U.S., job prospects threatened, donations pulled, and even lives lost in the wake of the October 7th attack on Israel by Hamas and the ongoing war.
I didn't want war before, and I don't want war now.
The son of an Israeli hostage and the father of another Israeli woman kidnapped.
This is an opportunity to connect between the two nations to reach an honest peace.
Part of a chorus of those directly affected by the conflict calling for unity. A message shared by the mother of a 6-year-old Palestinian American stabbed to death in Illinois.
I will say pray for peace.
A prayer ringing out from some who've suffered the heartache of loss through decades of conflict in the region.
You cannot kill anybody.
I cannot take revenge.
In the name of my child.
In the name and the beauty of my beloved daughter.
In 2002, IDF soldiers visited Robbie Damlin's home in Israel with tragic news. Her 28-year-old son, David, had been killed by a Palestinian sniper while manning a checkpoint. Then, in 2007, Bassam Aramin's 10-year-old daughter, Abir, standing outside her Palestinian school, was shot and killed by Israeli border police firing rubber bullets. Both parents say it was the worst day of their lives. That overwhelming pain, though, a catalyst that ultimately brought them together.
Bassam is just one of my best friends.
Robbie, she's a very noble human being.
I really respect him. Bassam is family.
We respect each other. This is the main thing that creates this unlikely friendship.
A friendship they share with more than 700 families who've lost loved ones. It's as part of a joint Israeli-Palestinian group called Parents Circle Families Forum.
Our relationship is above the conflict because we believe in a human being. We believe that we have the right to exist.
Families destined to be enemies instead, now bound by a common agony.
I remember sitting around a table and looking into the eyes of the Palestinian mothers and recognizing that we shared the same pain.
The group gathers for dialogue sessions, sharing and discussing personal experiences. They also host summer camps so Palestinian and Israeli kids can learn to play and live together.
We are here to hold vigil to demand that there be no more bereaved families.
Continuing their mission of hope and unity in the middle of an all-out war.
That's a kind of a miracle that Palestinians and Israelis are still willing to talk from our group.
It's a conversation they want to share with the rest of the world.
When you take a side, what you do is you import our conflict into your country and create hatred between Muslims and Jews.
We are not a soccer team to support one side against the other side. There is no winners. The only winners are the graves.
Urging Americans to choose their words and actions carefully in online posts and protests.
If you can't be part of the solution, it's better to leave us alone, because if you pro one, you're not helping Bassam, and pro the other, you're not helping me.
As they work for a way to be at peace in their own homes.
Let us make our future much better for our kids, both sides, for our civilians, for our lives.
Their group now includes families who've lost loved ones in the October 7th attacks, the war, and some with relatives currently in Gaza. And while the conflict keeps them from meeting face to face, they continue to keep the dialogue going online. Hallie?
Our thanks to Jay Gray for that reporting. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day, and because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. Out of our Western Bureau, officials in Alaska say at least one person is dead, dozens more missing after a big landslide. Look at that. You can see it there. It swept across a road. It took out a power line, a couple of homes. Troopers say an expert has to come in to make sure the area is safe before they can really get in there with the search and rescue operations on a bigger scale. They're also warning that more landslides could be possible. You see it there. Out of our Midwest Bureau, rivalry week. It's a hard thing to say. Let's say it again. Rivalry week. Can you say it? Whatever it is, it's happening between Ohio State University and the University of Michigan ahead of their football matchup this weekend. One thing you're not going to find around Ohio State's campus, the letter M. You see they're literally crossing out M's on signs, on building names, etc. They say it's a tradition that helps them get in the spirit for the game during rivalry week. Out of our Northeast Bureau, people in one New Hampshire town getting a big surprise after a man who lived there died and left about $3 million to the community. Friends say he lived a very simple, very frugal life, driving a lawnmower around. He didn't own a car. He didn't have a TV. After investing his money, he ended up saving a ton and bequeathed it to the town. They haven't decided how to use the money yet, but quite a windfall there. Coming up here on the show, some new clues tonight around that mysterious illness making dogs sick all across the country. Why scientists think a so-called funky bacteria may be causing it next. Tonight, a major new clue into what could be causing this mysterious dog sickness that's getting a ton of attention lately. Researchers say they think I'm going to quote them here, a funky bacterium could be to blame. It's basically this new kind of infection from a germ that's smaller than normal and tougher to identify. Scientists aren't sure yet if it's just one bug making dogs sick, but bottom line, it's happening. These dogs getting sick in several states. Maybe thousands of dogs. Some have even died. Dr. Natalie Azar is joining us now. And Dr. Azar, part of the issue here is the timing, right? You've got people maybe traveling for the holidays. That's a time when a lot of people might be putting dogs in kennels, right, in close contact with other dogs. You've now got researchers at the University of New Hampshire getting their findings on this funky bacterium out before their research is even published. Partly, it seems, it's to try to get some answers to this mystery around this dog illness.
Yeah, and the fact that they're actually releasing this to the public now before they've completed their research or truly made an identification in this case just speaks to the urgency that I think a lot of veterinarians around the country are feeling about this. So when they're describing this as a funky bacterium, what on earth does that even mean? Well, you know, it's as much about what it is as what it isn't. They don't believe that it's a virus, and that's important. As we know, we don't treat viruses, for example, with antibiotics, but it seems to have some genetic features features that we see and what we refer to as atypical bacteria. And this is where it's key, Hallie, because some of the features of this atypical bacteria would make it, for example, susceptible to a very common antibiotic like doxycycline. So I think that's why the researchers are releasing this, so that veterinarians around the country can say, you know what, it might be this. We may not be able to isolate it yet. Why don't we empirically give this dog who might be struggling with pneumonia doxycycline, for example?
There's no test, right, for this kind of thing. So what should people do about it? Like, listen, pets are like people's kids, right? I mean, like anything people can do to make sure that they stay safe is so important. But what's like a practical, concrete thing here?
I know. Well, first of all, it's recognizing symptoms, of course, right? So it's the typical cough that is persistent. The dogs will have a runny nose. It actually feels very viral in a sense, with, like, you know, itchy eyes and things like that. But if you're a dog owner, you want to maybe consider not boarding your dog right now. This is a respiratory virus. It's very transmissible between dogs. Keep them at home. Make sure your pets are up to date with their vaccines, for example, against kennel cough, which is caused by Bordetella. And, you know, maybe now's not a good time for doggy daycare. I'm reading this and learning about this as we all are, and thinking, maybe I want to keep my Rocky home around the holidays now. You know, there is a list of states where the cases have been detected a lot in Oregon, and this research comes out of New Hampshire, with some neighboring New England states sharing their information. You know, if it's not happening in a state near you right now, I don't think you need to be terribly alarmed. But just be vigilant. You know, be vigilant, and if your dog's not feeling well, take them in to get evaluated, Hallie.
That is good advice, as we just showed again that map of where this is happening. Dr. Natalie Azar, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Still to come, some new numbers out today make it sound like it may not be a great time to buy a house. We'll tell you what experts say has to happen for that to change. Coming up. The number of sales of homes on the market went down a little bit last month, dropping to a new low. In fact, a low we haven't seen in 13 years. Prices are still high, so are interest rates. Right now, there's like 3 months worth of inventory of houses for sale. That's about half of what experts say should be out there to have a healthy market. You see it here. A lot of people who already own homes, like 90% of these people, have a mortgage rate under 6%, according to some data out of Redfin. So it's not like these people with lower mortgage rates are dying to sell their homes to get a higher mortgage rate somewhere else, right? That's part of the impetus here. CNBC's senior real estate correspondent Diana Olick is here to break this all down. Okay, so these new numbers are out today. We've got high prices, higher rates, lower inventory. Bad for buyers, good for sellers? Like, how should we be thinking about this?
I don't, honestly, Hallie, I don't think it's great for buyers or sellers. And I'm going to get super technical on you right now and say this is the weirdest housing market I've ever seen. It is. Because you've got no supply. You've still got high demand. Prices are still going up. Mortgage rates are incredibly high, almost, twice what they were just 2 years ago, coming down a little bit in the last couple of weeks, but not much. And so if you're a seller, you definitely don't want to sell, because not only are you going to lose your 3% mortgage rate and change it up for 7%, but also, what are you going to buy? There's nothing else out there to buy. And then if you're a buyer, there's tons of competition out there, even though prices are high, which is weird. And even though mortgage rates are high, which is also weird, competition, which is leading to a bidding war, which is jacking up the price even more. So I don't think there's any winners here.
Were you surprised then to see these new numbers out today showing that that existing home sales were the lowest they've been in 13 years?
No, not at all. And actually, when you put that in perspective, 13 years ago, little history lesson, the reason that sales were so low 13 years ago was because of the expiration of the first-time homebuyer tax credit, which was this thing after the Great Recession where the government was trying to help first-time homebuyers get in, gave them this great tax credit that boosted home sales. Then it expired and home sales tanked. So now we're at the point where we were when home sales had tanked after a big tax credit. So it's really not good. If you go beyond that, we haven't seen sales this low in a couple of decades. So it's really because of this strange dynamic of nothing for sale. And you have the home builders. That's what could help things along. But the builders are still very cautious. They are selling homes. They are able to buy down the mortgage rate for their customers. So that's going to be your best bet if you really want to get into the housing market at a reasonable price and without the competition. But again, new homes are pricier than existing homes.
If you're like, hey, man, this is too much of a headache for me, I'm going to keep renting, how is the rental market looking?
Maybe that's a bright spot. I'll give you that. So apartment rents are coming down a little bit, and also single-family home rents, which are a big deal right now because there's a lot of people out there. If you can't buy a house, you don't want an apartment, you got a family, you want the school district, you want the suburbs, you're renting a single-family home, and that's why those prices stayed high for a while. They are starting to come down a little bit. So that's a better news on the rental market. Okay. And we are going to see more people staying, renting for longer because it's just simply cheaper.
Diana Olick, thank you so much for that breakdown. Appreciate it. That does it for us for this hour. We've got a lot more coverage picking up right now. As we're on the air here, we're waiting for what could be the biggest diplomatic breakthrough in this war between Israel and Hamas yet. A deal to release dozens of women and children abducted by Hamas terrorists being held in Gaza. This may be on the table, this release. An announcement may come at any minute. We're live in the region with the details we're just learning. Plus, a big test for Thanksgiving travel. A lot of wind, it's rainy, even snowy and icy in some spots, with millions of people heading home for the holiday. We've got your gut check on how the roads and the airports are looking in just a minute. Plus, breaking in just the past hour, a man suspected of killing 3 people in Colorado, now in police custody after a 24-hour manhunt. What we know about what happened and how they found him in another state. Then a step toward justice, potentially, in a string of mysterious attacks and robberies appearing to target the gay community in New York City. Why some victims say there's still a long way to go in our original. And a huge blow to one of the world's biggest crypto companies, now agreeing to shell out more than $4 billion as part of a deal with the Justice Department. How officials say the laws Binance broke helped terrorists, drug traffickers, and more easily move money around. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and we may be on the verge of a significant breakthrough in the Israel-Hamas war. Maybe. That's the operative word here, because right now it appears there's a tentative deal on the table to release at least some of the people being held hostage in Gaza. This is according to a senior U.S. official and a source familiar with the talks in the region. It's contingent on Israel approving this deal. I want to show you some of this here video just into us of top Israeli leaders meeting to decide on this, right? This is approval that could come really at any second here. As you're taking a look again, this just into us in the last couple of minutes. We may see at some point, possibly tonight, the biggest diplomatic breakthrough in this war so far. What would it look like, right? What would the contours of any deal be? Around 50 women and children held captive by Hamas for more than 6 weeks now after their abduction. They could be freed in exchange for around 150 Palestinian prisoners being held in Israel. The deal might also include an agreement, presumably, to pause fighting for some period of days, according to a top Hamas leader, with Israel saying late today it's also possible any ceasefire could last even longer if 10 more hostages a day are released. There's a lot of questions around all of this right now, because even though we might be minutes away from a breakthrough, it is not a done deal yet. And that is something that President Biden is making very clear tonight. Watch.
Very close, very close. We could bring some of these hostages home very soon. Nothing is done until it's done. And we have more to say, we will, but things are looking good at the moment.
So timing-wise, if a deal comes together tonight, don't expect to see any hostages walking free this evening. That's because there's a 24-hour appeals period that's built into a potential prisoner exchange. We'll have more on that in a minute. As this all hangs over the war, the Israeli military says it hit 250 more targets inside Gaza in just the last day. Hamas buildings, missile launchers, militants. We should note NBC News has not verified these claims. I want to bring in our team in the region here, Aaron McLaughlin and David Noriega, both live for us in Tel Aviv. David, I want to start with you. So where are we tonight? We're just getting this video in of those Israeli leaders meeting to talk about a potential deal. What do we know about timing? What do we know about where this goes next?
Yeah, Hallie, so it's past 1 a.m. here in Israel, and this meeting is still taking place to discuss potentially approving this deal. As far as the likelihood of it getting approved, most of the government establishment is behind it. That includes the security establishment, the IDF, the intelligence agencies. Prime Minister Netanyahu himself is trying to get this deal through. There is some opposition, though. Specifically, 2 parties that represent the far right wing of the governing coalition are openly opposed to this deal. They say that it gives too much to Hamas. That's probably one of the reasons this meeting is taking as long as it is. The general expectation here on the ground in Israel is that it's likely to pass. But as you said, even if it does, it will take some time to actually implement. Part of the thinking with that, 4 to 5 day pause in hostilities is that it would be intended to facilitate the transfer of these hostages and the taking place of this exchange of hostages for prisoners. As you pointed out, Hallie, it's not over till it's over, and all of these details are subject to change. Hallie?
So let's talk about, and again, with the caveat, that huge caveat that these details are subject to change, there's a couple of threads I want to pull on here, David. First, we're just learning tonight that the Red Cross, if this deal goes through, that one of the parameters is that the Red Cross could get access to the hostages who would not be freed, right? Because again, context, the majority of hostages will not end up freed if this deal goes through, right? 50 freed, which is obviously significant, but something like 150 plus would remain in captivity here. Talk us through that piece of it and what you're hearing from people, family members of some of these hostages, et cetera.
Yeah, it's a huge part of what's being discussed in the community of families of hostage members, of hostages tonight, right? So we know that this group of 50 that's expected to be released are mostly women and children. That leaves a lot of people, including, other adults, particularly adult males. Most of the families right now are not speaking to the press. We were actually told that they were advised by the government not to speak to the press, lest it jeopardize this negotiation. But we did speak to one woman who's the cousin of a 22-year-old man who is currently a hostage in Gaza. She says that he has health problems that, if not treated, could become very serious. This is what she had to say.
It's complicated because they do have the kids and the mothers, but also sick people that must get help now. And it's really hard for us, but we're waiting for all of them to come back.
There's really complicated feelings here tonight, Hallie, right? I mean, pretty much all of these families want this deal to go through. They want as many hostages to be released as possible. But some people are facing the incredibly difficult reality that they might see other people be reunited with their family members soon, and they might not get that chance.
David Noriega live for us there in Tel Aviv. There's a lot of moving pieces on this. I know you're standing by in the event of any news, as it is, as you mentioned, past 1 a.m. there where you are in Israel. Thanks, David. I want to bring in Aaron McLaughlin now. Aaron, part of the reason that the discussion of the ceasefire is so critical because of the new details we're getting on the cost of this war on civilians, on the innocent people caught up in this here. You've got the WHO trying to evacuate hospitals, and I want to play for people some of this video that we've seen. People trying to get water off of trucks that are bringing in help, right? We can show it here. I mean, they're basically, you can see the desperation, people rushing these trucks to try to get their hands on whatever they can. Talk to us about the humanitarian situation as it stands tonight.
Well, Hallie, the humanitarian situation is desperate, and the violence today continued in northern Gaza. There was a strike, according to Doctors Without Borders, in a hospital near the Jabalia refugee camp, and 2 of the Doctors Without Borders staff were killed in that strike. Doctors Without Borders, or MSF, putting out a statement about that attack today, saying MSF has regularly shared information about Al-Awda as a functioning hospital and the presence of our staff there to the warring parties. We condemn this strike in the strongest terms and call yet again for the respect and protection of medical facilities, staff, and patients. Now, this is one of the hospitals that I was actually just speaking with a WHO official about yesterday. He said that there were 2 hospitals out of 24 still functioning in northern Gaza. This one and another NGO hospital. Every single hospital in northern Gaza that is backed by the Gazan Health Ministry, which is Hamas-controlled, has been essentially put out of commission. The WHO right now is working to evacuate at least 3 hospitals, including the main hospital, which this WHO official described as the backbone of the Gazan healthcare system, the Al-Shifa hospital. And the concern among the WHO is if this war persists, if there is no pause in this fighting, that as the Israeli military starts to look south, what could happen to the situation in the south, which is already desperate given the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians that have fled there. Hallie.
Aaron, there's also a piece of this that we've been talking about a lot here on this show, which is the premature babies that were evacuated from Gaza into Egypt babies presumably younger than this war itself. They had been trapped in a hospital. Some of them got out. There's at least, I believe, 1 or 2 who are still in the hospital in Gaza because they're too fragile to evacuate. I know you've been reporting on this. What can you tell us tonight?
Yeah, these were babies that were trapped in that hospital I was just talking about, the backbone of the Gazan healthcare system, the Al-Shifa hospital that had been besieged for around 2 weeks. They managed, with the help of the WHO, to facilitate the evacuation, an evacuation which continues today. But the first tranche, if you will, of patients were those prematurely born babies that had to be removed from their incubators because of a lack of electricity inside of that hospital. They were brought, the majority of them, to Egypt, but 3 of the babies remain in Gaza. We met with one of the families. Anas is the baby's name. His family thought he was dead. They saw that the fighting around Al-Shifa, they were forced to flee to the south. They thought he was dead, and then suddenly saw that the babies had been evacuated. They called the hospital in the south asking if he was alive, and they said he was alive. And we saw today, he came home to his family today, and they were smiling and crying tears of joy. And in fact, in the 2 weeks that I've been here reporting on the story, it's the first smile that I've seen in Gaza. It was really a heartwarming scene, but it also sort of illustrates the point that behind every one of those babies, which captured the world's heart, there is a story and there's a family hoping and waiting. And we're told by the officials that many of those babies still have yet to be reunited with their families. Hallie.
Erin McLaughlin, it's incredible reporting. Thank you for bringing it to us here tonight. I appreciate it. I want to bring in now Oded Eshel. His cousin Alon Shimriz is being held by Hamas, apparently taken from his home in a kibbutz in Israel on October 7th. Oded, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me, Hallie.
Of course. Let me start with this question. I know it is late in Israel right now. Have you heard anything from the Israeli government at this point? Anything from any liaison to the family?
No, I mean, the family's been meeting with the army and the government when they can, but we don't have any updates on Alon. This is him right here.
Yeah. Tell me about him. Tell me about your relationship.
He's my cousin. He's my dad's sister's son. He's a sweet, sweet guy. He's 26 years old. He works in a company with his brothers and father, and he loves soccer. He loves traveling with his family. They love playing poker. He's just a good guy. I mean, really quick with a smile, really sweet, and we miss him terribly.
Yeah. Yeah. Is the potential of this deal on the table? And again, I don't know if you had a chance to hear our team of reporters in the region, Oded, talking about, obviously, the Israeli leaders here discussing for something like 6-7 hours now the potential for approving this deal. Is it giving you a sense of hope tonight? Where are you?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that every hostage taken is a tragedy, and it has reverberations across so many different people, family, friends, all over the world. So knowing that there's potential for a large number of hostages to be released, especially the babies and children. There's a 10-month-old baby in there held in a tunnel. It just absolutely breaks your heart that there's children being held by people who wish them harm, and being able to bring them home safely to their families fills me with a lot of hope. And I hope, deeply, and we pray that every hostage can be returned to their family.
It sounds like, then, that you see this as potentially only a first step, obviously, yeah?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the majority of the hostages are still back there. We know that several, have died, unfortunately. It's tough to know where it goes from here. It's such a fast-moving situation, and you just hope that both sides are able to negotiate for the freedom of the hostages.
What does it mean to you to know that the Red Cross might get access if this deal goes through to some of the hostages still held by Hamas even after the release of these roughly 50 women and children, which is what we think will happen here?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very hopeful about that. We've not had much much in the way of proof of life. A lot of these hostages have very serious medical conditions. Again, a 9-month-old baby that was taken, elderly male and female hostages that don't have their medication or access to it or access to physicians that can help them out. So I think that it's on the Red Cross and WHO and the international medical communities to at least care for the hostages while they're being held in Gaza.
What is your message tonight, Oded, to your cousin, to Israeli officials, and importantly, I think to people who might be watching here? As you know, we broadcast largely to the United States, although we do have worldwide distribution. What do you want people to know tonight?
I mean, look, I want people to know that Americans are being held hostage as well. This is not an Israeli problem. There's the citizens from dozens of countries who are being held hostage in Gaza right now. And I mean, there's a 3-year-old American toddler that's being held by Hamas right now, whose parents were killed. And I just hope that the international community can pressure Hamas to release the hostages and settle this. The way that they can, but it's so tragic and heartbreaking, this entire situation.
Oded Eshel, thank you so much for being with us. I know that it has been just a nightmare for you and for your family and for so many other families. We really appreciate your time tonight. Watching, of course, as you are there in Florida, we're here in Washington, looking at what happens overseas tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Of course. Also overseas tonight, more developments in the region with the U.S. military now retaliating against militants in Iraq after they say U.S. and coalition troops were attacked by a short-range ballistic missile. The Pentagon tonight saying that self-defense strike came fast. Listen.
We were able to identify the point of origin of these attacks because an AC-130 was up already in the area and therefore was able to respond.
There have now been at least 65 attacks against bases with Americans in Iraq and Syria, at least 62 injuries since October 17. Let me bring in Courtney Kuby, who is live for us at the Pentagon. So, Court, let's talk about here the speed of the retaliatory attack and the significance of this latest attack on U.S. and coalition forces here, because I think people might know if they watch the show, we've talked a lot about this, right? About the idea that since this Israel-Hamas war started, since October 17th, we've seen dozens of these kinds of attacks.
That's right. So as far as the speed of this retaliation, it was virtually immediate. As we just heard from Sabrina at the Pentagon, in the Pentagon briefing room, there was an AC-130 gunship, which is a U.S. military plane that was overhead at the time. It actually saw the launch, was able to target and attack the militants who fired it within a very short period of time. That's different from the previous strikes that the U.S. has taken. In addition to it, the location is different. Now, it's not the first time that Al-Assad Air Base in Iraq has been targeted by one of these militia groups, even in recent weeks. But it's the first time that the U.S. has responded in Iraq. The previous times the U.S. has taken airstrikes, they've all been in northeast Syria. Another thing that's different here is the U.S. targeted a vehicle with the militants in it. Previously, the U.S. has been going after infrastructure, so buildings with weapons and ammunition. There was another time in one of these previous strikes where the U.S. believes they may have killed some of these Iranian-backed militia members because it was a safe house. But they really don't know for certain how many individuals may have been killed in that strike. So this is very different. And then, of course, the thing that sets this apart from all the other attacks on these bases since October 17th, Hallie, is the fact that the militants used a close-range ballistic missile. It's what U.S. officials are calling a clear escalation in these attacks, Hallie.
So, Court, help us understand the relationship between what's happening between Israel and Hamas and these attacks on troops, right? Because this is a thread that I know that you've been pulling on in your reporting here. Walk us through that. Because I think people might be wondering, well, wait a second, does one have something to do with the other? How are they connected? How are they not?
Yeah, so this isn't the first time that U.S. bases have come under attack, and it's not the first time that the U.S. has responded to these sorts of attacks. In fact, there have been Americans who've been killed in the past by these sorts of attacks on bases in Iraq and Syria. But what's different is we hadn't seen anything like this for months, frankly, since March of this year. And they have really ticked up starting on October 17th. And while officials here in the Pentagon want to say it has nothing to do with Israel and Gaza, the reality is it's not happening in a vacuum, and we did not see these sorts of attacks. Also, very notable, Hallie, when you talk to defense officials here about these attacks, they call on Iran to tell these militia groups to stop carrying them out. So while there's not a direct link to Iran actually conducting these attacks, there is clearly a belief here in the Pentagon that Iran has somehow given a green light to these militia groups to speed up, to accelerate the number of attacks that they're carrying out here. We're seeing them virtually every single day. As you said, there have been more than 60, we believe at least 66 to date. And the real concern here is that one of them will be effective and that we'll see American service members or personnel badly injured or even killed in one of these attacks, Hallie.
Courtney Kube, thank you for staying on top of this, as always, for your great reporting. I appreciate you. So let's talk about here at home what's going down tonight, because there's kind of a lot, right? Look at this. Gross weather playing spoiler in a lot of people's Thanksgiving plans. You see it playing out here. That's Atlanta's airport. You just saw some of the runways there, pretty wet, gray skies on the right. Ugh, that's Philly, my folks. Listen, that's not ideal traffic, but it's not the worst in the world either. Still, the weather's not great. There's a storm dropping rain, snow, even ice in some spots right along the I-95 corridor, which, as you know, goes through some of the country's biggest cities on one of the country's biggest travel days of the year. Look at that. You can also see some of the big airports in the path of this storm. You see some of these hubs we're about to show you here in Chicago, New York, Atlanta. But not to jinx it, so far, so decent. It's not so bad. It's not a nightmare. 3,500 delays, but only about 60 cancellations. If you're one of those people on one of those 60 planes, you're not happy. But honestly, it could be worse. Meteorologist Bill Cairns is standing by with that. But first, I want to get to Stephen Romo in New York. Hey, Stephen. Seems like if the airports aren't so terrible, great. Question is the roads, with this snow, with this ice, with this wind, making conditions really yucky, especially at night on one of the busiest travel days of the year.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Hallie. Of course, more people do drive, but I think more of the complaints come from those airports and that holiday travel. Thankfully, as you mentioned, a lot of people preparing for the worst, but it has not manifested just yet. Things, though, they still are early. There have been some problems, though. The cloud cover did cause some temporary ground stop in Charlotte, North Carolina. That lifted, but then a ground delay was then instated there in Charlotte, North Carolina. So flights headed there were held at their departure cities for up to 90 minutes. So, of course, some more complaints coming in from that. Air travel, though, could get tougher tonight. Rain causing the FAA to consider those ground stops at JFK here in New York and at Reagan Airport in D.C. Many flyers, though, are saying that they have been burned so many times in the past that they are planning ahead. Here's more of what they had to say.
I was a little bit nervous that it would be some delays, but so far so good.
Delayed flights, 7 o'clock. I was supposed to, it's supposed to be 7:40 now. It's not too bad.
I feel very lucky that we're leaving on Tuesday, and so far it seems really easy and simple.
Now, the storm also has a wintry side, so Syracuse, New York, and also in Bedford, Massachusetts, workers had to head out to de-ice some of those planes. So there is some concern there, but nothing too punishing so far on that front, Hallie.
Knock on wood, Steve. Don't jinx it. Don't jinx it. Thank you very much, Stephen Romo. Appreciate it. I want to bring in now meteorologist Bill Cairns. And Bill, as we talk about weather, we are now getting word of a reported tornado in Alabama. Tell us more.
Yeah, we knew there was an isolated chance of a tornado today, and we just got confirmation from storm spotters in extreme southern Alabama of a tornado on the ground. This is the tornado warning for this thunderstorm, this supercell. And you can see the little red icon here is where we have the confirmed tornado. It looks like it's going to be just to the northwest of Hartford, Alabama. And you can see this is where the tornado would be located currently. Here's Dothan, Alabama, if you want some reference point. It looks like it should pass north of there, maybe somewhere close to Midland City here. So we'll watch that over about the next 45 minutes and see if this holds together. But it does look like the tornado has been on the ground now for at least the last 15 minutes. Other concerns, we are watching the heavy rain shield, slow on the roads, painfully slow in many cases. A lot of accidents reported in the mid-Atlantic because of this, the volume, the rain, low visibility, early sunset, you get it. And now the wintry precip is breaking out from about central New England northwards. So you can imagine the accidents that'll pile up here with a quick burst of snow, and then we'll get the the rain on top of that. The airports, let's see how they're holding up. All day long, they've been great. It's been amazing, and they're still all in the green. Pretty incredible considering the rain coming down. It's not that windy, so that certainly helps. Charlotte has the most delays right now, and then behind that is Atlanta when they had that line of thunderstorms go through. Those are the two worst airports for delays. By the time we get to Wednesday afternoon and evening, we're done. The exception being Maine. Maine's probably going to be in the rain and snow throughout much of Wednesday. Boston the first half of the day, but everyone else will clear out pretty quickly, which is great news. Here's that snow forecast, and it keeps going up. Areas in New Hampshire and the Maine, 4 to 6 inches in some cases. Even the Adirondacks, too. North of about Albany is where you'll get some accumulations on the grass, especially. Driving through Vermont won't be easy either. Just about another 2 to 4 inches. So the forecast as we go into your Wednesday, much of the country looks pretty good. Exiting storm in the east. Thanksgiving Day. This is our next storm with some snow moving down throughout the Rockies, on and off snow for areas like Cheyenne, all the way to Casper, and then possible snow for you in Denver, maybe even accumulating snows. That's going to be for your Friday. East Coast is great. And then by the time we go through the weekend, this storm kind of fizzles out a little bit. Eastern half of the country is great. And Hallie, the busiest travel day of them all is Sunday, and it looks like some light snow in the Great Lakes, some storms in the southeast. Much of the air should be just fine. I'll keep you guys updated if I hear anything else about damage or any injuries or anything from that tornado that's on the ground in Alabama right now.
Yeah, please do. I know you'll check back in with us throughout the night here on the network. Appreciate it. Yeah. Listen, we've got to get to some breaking news out west, because in just the last hour, we've learned that a manhunt has ended as a man suspected of shooting and killing 3 people in Colorado is in police custody, but not in the same state where the crime actually happened. Look at this new picture coming into us tonight, showing this suspect arrested by New Mexico State Police after this day-long manhunt that is now apparently stretched across state lines. What happened? Well, the shooting happened Monday afternoon in the Colorado neighborhood you see here. A SWAT team showed up, told people in the area to shelter in place for something like 7 hours. Police say the shooting was over what they call suspected property dispute. One other person was hurt. Steve Patterson is joining us now. Okay, police, Steve, in Colorado had said they've been working around the clock to try to find him. They now apparently have, but he was in New Mexico. What's the deal?
Yeah, in New Mexico, surrounded and captured by New Mexican authorities working in concert, of course, with the Sheriff's Department and the U.S. Marshal Service that was tracking this guy, apparently, as you mentioned, across state lines. It begs a lot of questions. What the heck is this guy who is accused of killing 3 people in Custer County, Colorado, doing in New Mexico? Did he have friends there? Did he have family there? Was he heading for the border? Unfortunately, it's just far too early to answer those questions. What we do know is what we got about an hour ago, as you and I were talking as this news were breaking. The sheriffs gave us an update at a news conference. We know that police since yesterday, since that shooting and then shelter in place and then dragnet over the entire state, that police were looking for this white Bronco. You can see it in the picture that is on your screen, this white Dodge Ram, excuse me. Apparently the suspect was in that Dodge Ram in New Mexico. This was not necessarily an amicable arrest. This was a takedown, guns drawn in the middle of traffic, taken into custody, will be extradited at some point back to the state of Colorado. But as for why, again, he was in New Mexico, we just don't know. This all happened, as you mentioned, yesterday afternoon at about 1 p.m. local. The news of the arrest came out at about 3 p.m. local today. So about 24-hour period or so, there was this huge dragnet. They were trying so hard to capture this guy. He was spotted, or his white vehicle spotted in the county over, but police couldn't get a beat on him until apparently today, where a U.S. Marshal Service had a tip that came in during one of the press conferences that was given earlier. This all stems from apparently this what amounts to an elevated domestic situation between neighbors, an argument over property lines and an easement that had been back and forth since 2020. According to the Sheriff's Department, they've been getting multiple calls about fighting between these two parties, between neighbors, essentially. But the sheriff earlier today said he never thought it would have amounted in something as tragic as this. We're still learning, obviously, more details about how this all happened. But for now, the suspect, 45-year-old Jaime Clark, in custody. Hallie?
What else do you know about the victims here in the shooting, Steve, including the person who was hurt?
Yeah, of course, the suspect took aim at 5 victims. 4 were shot. 3 killed. We have their names. We can put them on screen there. James and Patty Dalton. There's a reason why they have the same name. That's a married couple. There's also Robert Gears and Beth Wade. You may see Beth Wade, but it's also Beth Wade Gears. So that's 2 married couples that this guy apparently took aim at. And unfortunately, in this tragic situation, 3 lives lost. Hallie.
Steve Patterson, thank you so much for staying on top of this as this has unfolded now, as you say, in just the last 90 minutes. Appreciate it. Also unfolding late today, the CEO of the world's biggest crypto exchange is acknowledging breaking rules against money laundering, which the Justice Department says made it easier for criminals and terrorists around the world to move around money on the platform. We're talking about Binance, right? It is huge in the crypto world. It is a huge, big deal, as the DOJ is just announcing a plea agreement involving a $4 billion settlement to help close an investigation that's been going on for years. Here's the Attorney General.
Binance prioritized its profits over the safety of the American people. Now, Binance is paying one of the largest corporate penalties in U.S. history.
So the allegations against Binance are pretty similar to another big crypto exchange you've probably heard of. Remember FTX? Binance was one of its main rivals before it collapsed. So you've got the DOJ now with what experts see as wins against 2 huge crypto exchanges operating at the time at their peaks. Kate Rooney is joining us now. So, Kate, $4 billion to let this company keep running, but its very powerful CEO is going to step down. How big of a deal is this?
Hallie, so this is massive. You heard Merrick Garland just say that it is the largest penalty in the history of the Treasury Department. So the dollar amount is huge. It's a huge influential company in the crypto space, the biggest company globally. And the CEO is also known as CZ, Changpeng Zhao, is agreeing to plead guilty in this federal case for federal charges. He's paying this $50 million fine as part of the larger $4 billion number. And that penalty, he's going to step down as CEO. This is the company he created, he ran, he was the figurehead, and he's been a really outspoken CEO on X, or formerly Twitter. He tried to draw a few different distinctions and differences between what happened at his company and what happened over at FTX. He said that the U.S. agencies in question here, they don't allege that Binance misappropriated any user funds or that Binance engaged in any market manipulation, which was the big story when it came to FTX. Sam Bankman-Fried misused and stole customer funds. Binance did not. That is a key distinction. And in that sense, he's still kind of seen as a hero in this industry. He's being referred to really as a martyr here by some of the investors who still very much respect him and say that he made mistakes. But the DOJ seeing this very much as a win today.
What are you hearing, and how do you see this, and how should we be thinking about this from the DOJ perspective? Because you had first FTX, right? Now Binance, as these federal officials, kind of come to terms or try to maybe get a handle on this fairly new world, like in the realm of things.
So it's hard to understand how influential and how big these 2 companies were globally. These were some of the big figureheads. Sam Bankman-Fried and CZ were the best known CEOs and executives and entrepreneurs in the space. So in that sense, a huge hit to the industry. This was expected. The investigation had gone on for years, and it really speaks to some of the dark underbelly of crypto. Some of the things that the DOJ talked about and accused Binance of facilitating are really awful. Transactions that aided child sexual abuse, terrorist financing, sanctions violations. So in that sense, these are just really an awful reality of this industry. Those who are left in the industry, the legitimate players who are regulated in the U.S. say it's a good thing, they're going to move on. These were very much traditional financial crimes. The industry is going to try to turn the page here to a new chapter and hopefully a more legitimate chapter. But they're saying that this is part of the shakeout. They're moving on, and these have happened in the previous years of crypto. They see it as a chance to move on and try to build a really more legitimate chapter of finance and kind of go into the Wall Street mainstream here.
Kate Rooney, it's fascinating stuff. Thank you for that crystal clear breakdown. I appreciate it, as always. It's good to see you. Coming up, a lot more to get to here on the show, including the first images of trapped workers still stuck in that collapsed tunnel in India more than a week later. What doctors are telling them to do as rescuers race against time to get them out. You see them there. Plus, one woman's fight to get her tip money back. You are never going to guess how much she paid for a Subway sandwich, apparently by accident. To tonight's original now with in-depth reporting on a topic we've been watching. And tonight, it's new details about a man sentenced this week to 9 years in prison for the robbery of a New York City gay bar patron. Prosecutors say it is only the first sentencing in a much bigger investigation that looks at a whole bunch of similar incidents, deadly incidents that left 2 people dead and had the LGBTQ plus community on edge. But for some of the many victims still out there, questions still linger. Here's Noah Pransky.
The attacks seemed targeted. Men at several New York City gay bars drugged, robbed, and thousands drained from their bank accounts. 2 of the victims died.
It's scary, actually, because it could happen to anyone.
Authorities say facial recognition was used to unlock some of their phones. Fear began to run rampant inside New York City's LGBTQ plus community. NBC News reporting shed light on the string of attacks starting last year.
I've been reporting on this scheme for about a year or more now, and I've spoken with victims and victims' family members for hours upon hours.
He was very lovable and smart. Now, finally, some answers after NBC News out reporter Matt Levitas went to Rikers Island Jail to speak with a man who pled guilty to one robbery that prosecutors say was connected to a larger crime ring. That man, Eddie Ashley, said he was just looking for a hookup when he went to a bar called The Ritz in New York's Hell's Kitchen. He later went home with someone and pled guilty to stealing their phone and wallet. He was sentenced this week to 9 years in prison, the most significant development yet in the wider investigation.
I lost a lot being here for something that was just one night. Like I said before, I was kind of intoxicated that night, so I don't remember too much stuff that happened that night.
Prosecutors say the broader ring left 16 men victimized.
It was clearly rooted in greed, total disregard for the victims.
Ashley denies knowledge of the crime ring and was not charged with murder, but 3 other men were. All told, 5 other men now charged, all pleading not guilty, now all awaiting trial. At first, for authorities, the crimes largely blended into the busy background of New York City nightlife. But for families of the 2 men killed, originally told by police their loved ones died from accidental drug overdoses, the stories just didn't add up. Telling us last year,
there is definitely a system of being drugged, whether it's through drinking something or needles or whatever, that renders the person immobile to protest from being taken advantage of, and it wipes out your memory.
It took pressure from families, reporting from outlets like NBC News, and demonstrations to bring the attacks into full public view. But some victims still don't know if their attacks are connected to this specific alleged crime ring or other criminals using the same tactics. Back at Rikers, Eddie Ashley still downplaying his alleged role in the crimes, suggesting he only pled guilty to avoid trial.
I just really wanted you to get past everything.
For NBC's Matt Levitas, closure also tough to find.
This entire story has been about chronicling the pain of the city's LGBTQ community. And here before me was another young gay man, also in pain for different reasons, of course. But I was truly saddened.
Noah is joining us now. So Noah, talk us through the sort of police status here. Do they think these are still crimes specifically targeting the LGBTQ plus community?
No, actually, at this point, prosecutors now believe that while many of the men who were targeted were gay men at gay bars, that was not really the motive. Profit and financial was deemed at this point to be the prime motive. Little consolation, of course, to many in the community here in New York who are so troubled that their community was under attack. Hallie?
Noah Pransky, thank you so much for that reporting, to Matt Levitas and others as well. Appreciate it. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, a shooter has killed himself and hurt 4 others at a Walmart in Ohio. Officials say they haven't ruled out it could have been racially motivated. Walmart says it's working with investigators on this. All of it coming a day after 2 people were shot and killed outside a different Walmart in Alaska. Number 2, Boston Bruins hockey player Milan Lucic pleading not guilty to assaulting his wife today, getting released on personal recognizance. Basically, that's like a promise he'll show up in court when he's supposed to. According to a police report, his wife reported he tried to choke her over the weekend. The Bruins say Lucic has taken an indefinite leave of absence. Number 3, take a look at this. A Navy plane that overshot a runway in Hawaii ended up, in the ocean. Fortunately, all 9 people on board were okay, according to officials. They're obviously looking into what happened here. Number 4, a big Hollywood talent agency dropping Susan Sarandon not long after her comments at a pro-Palestinian rally. Sarandon reportedly said that Jewish people, in her words, are getting a taste of what it's like to be a Muslim in America, often subjected to violence. No word from Sarandon on this just yet. Number 5, a total tipping nightmare. A woman in Georgia accidentally paid more than, well, I'm going to tell you, she bought a Subway sandwich. She paid more than $7,000 for it. How in the world? She said she was putting in her phone number for the loyalty points when the screen, she thinks, maybe switched to the tip. She spent about a month trying to get the money back. She finally got a temporary credit. She says she's not going to use reward apps ever again. When we come back, we'll take it back to the Middle East because you'll meet an Israeli and Palestinian united by loss, now working together to bring peace. So even as officials close in on a hostage deal between Israel and Hamas, we are still seeing so much fighting, and sometimes it can be hard to see an end to the death and destruction. Communities so divided, increasingly entrenched on social media. But there is a group of Israelis and Palestinians made up of some of the people most impacted by the decades-old conflict that comes together to support each other. Jay Gray has more.
Outrage and emotions online and spilling into the streets. Across the U.S., job prospects threatened, donations pulled, and even lives lost in the wake of the October 7th attack on Israel by Hamas and the ongoing war.
I didn't want war before, and I don't want war now.
The son of an Israeli hostage and the father of another Israeli woman kidnapped.
This is an opportunity to connect between the two nations to reach an honest peace.
Part of the chorus of those directly affected by the conflict calling for unity. A message shared by the mother of a 6-year-old Palestinian American stabbed to death in Illinois.
I will say pray for peace.
A prayer ringing out from some who've suffered the heartache of loss through decades of conflict in the region.
You cannot kill anybody.
I cannot take revenge.
In the name of my child.
In the name and the beauty of my beloved daughter.
In 2002, IDF soldiers visited Robbie Damlin's home in Israel with tragic news. Her 28-year-old son, David, had been killed by a Palestinian sniper while manning a checkpoint. Then, in 2007, Bassam Aramin's 10-year-old daughter, Abir, standing outside her Palestinian school, was shot and killed by Israeli border police firing rubber bullets. Both parents say it was the worst day of their lives. That overwhelming pain, though, a catalyst that ultimately brought them together.
Bassam is just one of my best friends.
Robbie, she's a very noble human being.
I really respect him. Bassam is family.
We respect each other. This is the main thing that creates this unlikely friendship.
A friendship they share with more than 700 families who've lost loved ones. As part of a joint Israeli-Palestinian group called Parents Circle Families Forum.
Our relationship is above the conflict because we believe in a human being. We believe that we have the right to exist.
Families destined to be enemies instead, now bound by a common agony.
I remember sitting around a table and looking into the eyes of the Palestinian mothers and recognizing that we shared the same pain.
The group gathers for dialogue sessions, sharing and discussing personal experiences. They also host summer camps so Palestinian and Israeli kids can learn to play and live together.
We are here to hold vigil to demand that there be no more bereaved families.
Continuing their mission of hope and unity in the middle of an all-out war.
That's a kind of a miracle that Palestinians and Israelis are still willing to talk from our group.
It's a conversation they want to share with the rest of the world.
When you take a side, what you do is you import our conflict into your country and create hatred between Muslims and Jews.
We are not a soccer team to support one side against the other side. There is no winners. The only winners are the graves.
Urging Americans to choose their words and actions carefully in online posts and protests.
If you can't be part of the solution, it's better to leave us alone, because if you pro one, you're not helping Bassam, and pro the other, you're not helping me.
As they work for a way to be at peace in their own homes.
Let us make our future much better for our kids, both sides, for our civilians, for our lives.
Their group now includes families who've lost loved ones in the October 7th attacks, the war, and some with relatives currently in Gaza. And while the conflict keeps them from meeting face to face, they continue to keep the dialogue going online. Hallie?
Our thanks to Jay Gray for that reporting. NBC News covers hundreds of other international stories every day. And because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our teams around the world have done it for you. Here is some of what they're watching in a segment we call The Global. Out of the Republic of Congo, at least 31 people are dead, dozens more hurt after a big stampede at a military stadium there. A big crowd, mostly younger people, had been waiting hours to register at a recruitment event when apparently this crush began. Officials say all recruitment operations are suspended until further notice. Out of India, take a look at this. Some new video of dozens of workers, just some of the dozens of workers still trapped in a collapsed tunnel there. It's been like 10 days. They're getting hot food for the first time today after rescuers put in place a new pipe. Officials say all these people are healthy. Incredibly, teams are working to get them out. Doctors are apparently suggesting they meditate and practice yoga to help with the anxieties of being stuck in a small space like that. And out of Ukraine, the president there, Volodymyr Zelensky, telling The Sun tabloid he's lost count of the amount of Russian assassination attempts he survived, saying there have been no fewer than 5. NBC News could not independently verify his claims. Coming up here on the show, new clues tonight around that mysterious illness making dogs really sick all around the country. Why scientists think a so-called, in their words, funky bacteria may be causing it. Tonight, a major new clue into what could be causing this mysterious dog sickness that's getting a ton of attention lately. Researchers say they think I'm going to quote them here, a funky bacterium could be to blame. It's basically this new kind of infection from a germ that's smaller than normal and tougher to identify. Scientists aren't sure yet if it's just one bug making dogs sick, but bottom line, it's happening. These dogs getting sick in several states, maybe thousands of dogs. Some have even died. Dr. Natalie Azar is joining us now. And Dr. Azar, part of the issue here is the timing, right? You've got people maybe traveling for the holidays. That's a time when a lot of people might be putting dogs in kennels, right, in close contact with other dogs. You've now got researchers at the University of New Hampshire getting their findings on this funky bacterium out before their research is even published. Partly, it seems, it's trying to get some answers to this mystery around this dog illness.
Yeah, and the fact that they're actually releasing this to the public now before they've completed their research or truly made an identification in this case just speaks to the urgency that I think a lot of veterinarians around the country are feeling about this. So when they're describing this as a funky bacterium, what on earth does that even mean? Well, you know, it's as much about what it is as what it isn't. They don't believe that it's a virus, and that's important. As we know, we don't treat viruses, for example, with antibiotics, but it seems to have some genetic features that we see and what we refer to as atypical bacteria. And this is where it's key, Hallie, because some of the features of this atypical bacteria would make it, for example, susceptible to a very common antibiotic like doxycycline. So I think that's why the researchers are releasing this so that veterinarians around the country can say, you know what, it might be this. We may not be able to isolate it yet. Why don't we empirically give this dog who might be struggling with pneumonia doxycycline, for example?
There's no test, right, for this kind of thing. So what should people do about it? Like, listen, pets are like people's kids, right? I mean, like anything people can do to make sure that they stay safe is so important. But what's like a practical, concrete thing here?
I know. Well, first of all, it's recognizing symptoms, of course, right? So it's the typical cough that is persistent. The dogs will have a runny nose. It actually feels very viral in a sense with, like, you know, itchy eyes and things like that. But if you're a dog owner, you want to maybe consider not boarding your dog right now. This is a respiratory virus. It's very transmissible between dogs. Keep them at home. Make sure your pets are up to date with their vaccines, for example, against kennel cough, which is caused by Bordetella. And, you know, maybe now's not a good time for doggy daycare. I'm reading this and learning about this as we all are and thinking, maybe I want to keep my Rocky home around the holidays now. You know, there is a list of states where the cases have been detected a lot in Oregon, and this research comes out of New Hampshire with some neighboring New England states sharing their information. You know, if it's not happening in a state near you right now, I don't think you need to be terribly alarmed. But just be vigilant. You know, be vigilant, and if your dog's not feeling well, take them in to get evaluated, Hallie.
That is good advice, as we just showed again that map of where this is happening. Dr. Natalie Azar, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Still to come, some new numbers out today make it sound like it may not be a great time to buy a house. We'll tell you what experts say has to happen for that to change. Coming up. The number of sales of homes on the market went down a little bit last month, dropping to a new low. In fact, a low we haven't seen in 13 years. Prices are still high, so are interest rates. Right now, there's like 3 months worth of inventory of houses for sale. That's about half of what experts say should be out there to have a healthy market. You see it here. A lot of people who already own homes, like 90% of these people, have a mortgage rate under 6%, according to some data out of Redfin. So it's not like these people with lower mortgage rates are dying to sell their homes to get a higher mortgage rate somewhere else, right? That's part of the impetus here. CNBC's senior real estate correspondent, Diana Olick, is here to break this all down. Okay, so these new numbers are out today. We've got high prices, higher rates, lower inventory. Bad for buyers, good for sellers? Like, how should we be thinking about this?
I don't honestly, Hallie, I don't think it's great for buyers or sellers. And I'm going to get super technical on you right now and say this is the weirdest housing market I've ever seen. It is. Because you've got no supply. You've still got high demand. Prices are still going up. Mortgage rates are incredibly high, almost, twice what they were just 2 years ago, coming down a little bit in the last couple of weeks, but not much. And so if you're a seller, you definitely don't want to sell because not only are you going to lose your 3% mortgage rate and change it up for 7%, but also what are you going to buy? There's nothing else out there to buy. And then if you're a buyer, there's tons of competition out there, even though prices are high, which is weird. And even though mortgage rates are high, which is also weird, competition, which is leading to a bidding war, which is jacking up the price even more. So I don't think there's any winners here.
Were you surprised then to see these new numbers out today showing that that existing home sales were the lowest they've been in 13 years?
No, not at all. And actually, when you put that in perspective, 13 years ago, a little history lesson, the reason that sales were so low 13 years ago was because of the expiration of the first-time homebuyer tax credit, which was this thing after the Great Recession where the government was trying to help first-time homebuyers get in, gave them this great tax credit that boosted home sales. Then it expired and home sales tanked. So now we're at the point where we were when home sales had tanked after a big tax credit. So it's really not good. If you go beyond that, we haven't seen sales this low in a couple of decades. So it's really because of this strange dynamic of nothing for sale. And you have the home builders. That's what could help things along. But the builders are still very cautious. They are selling homes. They are able to buy down the mortgage rate for their customers. So that's going to be your best bet if you really want to get into the housing market at a reasonable price and without the competition. But again, new homes are pricier than existing homes.
If you're like, hey, man, this is too much of a headache for me, I'm going to keep renting, how's the rental market looking?
Maybe that's a bright spot. I'll give you that. So apartment rents are coming down a little bit, and also single-family home rents, which are a big deal right now because there's a lot of people out there. If you can't buy a house, you don't want an apartment, you got a family, you want the school district, you want the suburbs, you're renting a single-family home, and that's why those prices stayed high for a while. They are starting to come down a little bit. So that's a better news on the rental market. And we are going to see more people renting for longer because it's just simply cheaper.
Diana Olick, thank you so much for that breakdown. Appreciate it. That does it for us for this hour. We've got a lot more coverage picking up right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.